L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Fast that Canadians didn't want champagne for Thanksgiving. They just want some food. And I did a little bit of price shopping on that for him. In the last days of the Conservative government, the price for a pound of turkey was $1.49. And the flyers today show it's $2.49, a 70% increase. And I might add that the picture of the turkey during the Conservative years was a big, plump, beautiful bird, whereas right now it's a skimpy, shrimpy little thing that looks like it's been taxed to death. Mr. Speaker, why won't they get off the back of the turkey so that we can have a nice dinner for Thanksgiving?
L'honorable ministre.
Speaker, the leader of the opposition can have as much as he wants. But one thing I can tell you, Canadians have no fun these days, Mr. Speaker, because they know, Mr. Speaker.
Settle down. À l'ordre. L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. 23 seconds left.
Mr. Speaker, I hope they have as much energy to support our bill, Mr. Speaker, to make a difference in the life of Canadians. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is not a joke, Mr. Speaker. Canadians expect action. That's what we've taken this morning with a 5-item action plan to help stabilize pricing in Canada. And if the Conservatives want to keep laughing and make jokes, Mr. Speaker, tell that to Canadians, which expect them to approve Bill 66, reform competition, lower prices in Canada, and make sure that Canadians can have what they deserve from the situation.
He said Canadians aren't having any fun, and he's got that right, because after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. He says we should energetically support his bills. Well, he's been forcing, and his Prime Minister has been forcing Canadians to support Liberal bills for 8 years, and the bill is way too high. Food prices are up more than 20% in 2 years, the fastest increase in interest rates in monetary history. Why won't they stop sending Canadians the bill and let Canadians afford to eat, heat, and house themselves this Thanksgiving?
L'honorable ministre.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the leader of the opposition. He's coming actually to some sense. He realized that the best way to help Canadians is to support the government, Mr. Speaker, because this is a time where all parliamentarians needs to come together, Mr. Speaker. That's why we presented a plan that's going to help to stabilize prices in Canada, that's going to increase competition in this country, and it's going to take measures to help Canadians. Mr. Speaker, if he wants to give a gift to Canadians for Thanksgiving, why don't he support C-56 and show Canadians that he can do something for them?
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, it's funny. It's always complicated for Liberals to defend French in Quebec. Take, for but the fact is that there are more French speakers than ever before, and this government will always endeavor to do more every day, and that there will be more French speakers every day. The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the Minister of Immigration here. The federal government increased the number of temporary immigrants to Quebec by 150,000 people this year. Quebec is worried about its settlement capacity, and the Quebec immigration minister discussed this with the federal minister, but said that the concept of settlement capacity was not part of his thinking. The same minister who has all the trouble in the world admitting French is threatened, he doesn't recognize that settlement capacity has to be part of his thinking on immigration. Do we really have to explain that to him? The honourable minister. Mr. Speaker, the figure the member opposite is referring to is mother tongue. That excludes me and a whole bunch of other ministers. I am a proud Quebecer, proud of being so, proud to say so, but the statistic he's referring to is mother tongue. But we should be proud of the high number of people who can speak French in Quebec, and the member should be ashamed of using statistics the way he is. I'm a proud Quebecer and a proud speaker of French. The honourable member for Burnaby South. Thank you.
21 months since food prices have outpaced general inflation. Almost, and the Prime Minister wasn't willing to do anything until he started falling behind in the polls. That's 2 years that Canadians have been struggling because this government's unwilling to take on the real problem, which is corporate greed. Now, will the government admit that their plan to scramble and try to do something is to save themselves, not Canadians?
Hear, hear.
L'honorable présidente du Conseil de Trésor.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, I beg to differ. We actually have been putting in place programs to support Canadians, bill after bill, law after law. 11 million Canadians with the grocery rebate, Mr. Speaker. 4.2 million Canadians with the workers' benefit. 6 million Canadians in increasing old age security. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because our government believes in investing in Canadians time after time, and we will continue to do that to build a stronger Canada. Thank you.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Curse the privatization of our healthcare system. Shoppers Drug Mart, owned by Galen Weston, is rapidly expanding an American-style for-profit healthcare delivery in our country, and the government's nowhere to be seen. Last election, the Prime Minister said he would defend public universal healthcare, and now he calls privatization innovation. So what's the plan? Wait another 2 years and then ask Galen Weston nicely to stop?
That Canadians aren't faced with the impossible choice of essentials or the medicine they need.
L'honorable député de Haldeman Norfolk.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, even Thanksgiving dinner has become unaffordable. Food banks across the country are overwhelmed. With Thanksgiving approaching, some food banks have made the tough decision of cutting back on distributing food because they just don't have enough to go around. The Liberals' carbon taxes have driven up the cost of Thanksgiving staples like potatoes by 77%. Will this Prime Minister reverse this 77% hike on Thanksgiving food before Thanksgiving, as he promised? Yes or no?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, if the Conservative member wants to see grocery prices lowered, I hope that she asks her leader why it is that the Conservatives continue to delay the legislation that is before this House. In fact, just this morning, I was so pleased to see the member for Mission Mesquite Fraser Canyon say that he supports Bill C-56. And I wonder if other Conservatives can convince their leader to support this bill, because Canadians are counting on all of us in this House to help stabilize grocery prices.
L'honorable député de Haldeman Norfolk.
Canadians are counting on immediate relief before Thanksgiving. People are rationing food across this country. According to Food Banks Canada, people are making impossible choices between paying their rent or putting food on the table for their families. This Liberal NDP government continues their inflationary spending, which has cost 4%, as in the case with lettuce. Canadians are realizing that this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost.
That's right.
Will this Prime Minister keep his promise
okay, we're good now.
and reverse his punishing?
Okay. Thank you for telling me I was muted.
Mr.
Nothing
Speaker,
but problems
there are
today.
important measures that can be immediately implemented in order to help Canadians. But the problem is what we hear from the Conservatives are very sincere concerns in question period. But then when it comes time to vote, Mr. Speaker, when it comes time to debate legislation, what we're seeing are procedural delay tactics and Conservatives voting against the interests of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I would urge everybody in this House to act in order to support Canadians, stabilize prices, and get more homes built in this country.
L'honorable député de Dufferin Caledon.
This will not be a happy Thanksgiving for many Canadian families because food prices are absolutely out of control. And the NDP leader just said that food inflation has outpaced in Liberal NDP coalition. What could be happening, Mr. Speaker? But the sad fact is this: Canadian families are going to have to make the hard choice: feed their family or pay their rent. Will the Prime Minister finally recognize the damage he's done to Canada, keep his promise so they have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et comme je dis...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, we're taking concrete steps. They're on the table right here in the House. And I don't understand how the Conservatives can pretend to...
Yeah. Anyway, blather. Just I'm going to take a couple of minutes to apologize that my mic was not working because I had to turn the system off so I could get the other sound working. And it's just been one cacophony of technical problems today. But anyway, thank you for bearing with me. At least you got to hear the politicians talk. Hasn't been much witty analysis today, but we'll do our best. We're going to keep doing this as much as possible.
Only a party whose leader said, "I admire the basic dictatorship of China," would say legitimate debate about a government piece of legislation is so inconvenient and an obstruction. That is a disgraceful comment and an opinion. But it's not a surprise from these Liberals whose leader admires the basic dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, everything they've done has done nothing to improve food affordability. After 8 long years of this Liberal government, Canadians can't pay for food. Will the Prime Minister keep his promise so Canadians can have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
It's going to be a tough question to answer, but wait for it.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the Conservatives can then explain in debate what it is about cutting GST on the construction of new homes that they actually disagree with. What is it about strengthening competition laws to stabilize grocery prices here in Canada that they disagree with, because I haven't heard a single argument in debate that has convinced any Canadian in this country that we shouldn't proceed with those measures, Mr. Speaker. And if the Conservatives want to help Canadians, they should be sincere in their actions. They should vote in the interests of Canadians.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable.
All right, good time to take a break. Why are the Conservatives opposing GST on construction? Because it's only going to benefit contractors who will not pass the savings on to renters and buyers. How stupid is that proposal? And Trudeau's idiotic proposal to somehow stabilize the price of groceries, he doesn't even know what he's going to do. He talked about taxing grocery stores to stabilize the price. How is that going to stabilize the prices? It's going to drive up the prices. Anyone with the mentality of a 10-year-old could figure that out. But Justin Trudeau doesn't even possess that standard of mentality. He really is deficient in that area, completely deficient. And if he imposes some sort of price controls at the grocery store, it's going to mean such scarcity, such a vast expanse of emptiness in the grocery stores that Canadians are going to start starving, or perhaps eating a lot of macaroni and cheese at night, because there'll be nothing else on the shelves. This is how insane and how stupid these Liberal ministers, parliamentary secretaries, whoever else they drag up there to justify this government's agenda. That's how stupid they are, because they don't think through anything. They just throw out policy ideas that aren't even ideas. They're written on the back of cocktail napkins. Anyway, I had to rant about that because you just get sick of these idiots standing up in question period and suggesting they have ideas. They don't even have ideas. They're not even bad ideas. They're not even ideas because nobody has put any kind of thought into them. They're threats. That's what they are.
Oh, he went to talk about independence. If you vote for the Bloc, you'll pay for it. Will the Prime Minister call his Bloc ambassador back home and tell him how he's going to keep his promise to lower food prices in time for Thanksgiving?
Okay, let's see. You're going to hear the same thing.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I think today's debate requires a bit of seriousness from the Conservatives. We're talking about the challenges Quebecers and Canadians are facing. The cost of living has gone up recently, and today we have taken steps. We have legislation to help Canadians lower the cost of rent and groceries, but the Conservatives are voting against everything we do, everything to fight climate change and so on.
Good.
They should support C-56 so that we can stabilize grocery prices, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, good news. Quebec will be matching the federal contribution of $900 million for housing. There's just one detail, one small detail. The money.
Yeah, and they go crying for more money for Quebec again. This is every time this guy stands up. He's looking for that money. You're looking for that money from the housing fund. Still hasn't seen it. This is just amazing. But I'd like to know how many of you out there, you listeners, go to bed every night worrying about climate change. I don't know anybody who goes to bed at night sleepless because they're worried about climate change. They're worried about this imminent catastrophe, the world ending because of global warming or whatever they want to call it now. I don't know anybody. I think people, if they can't sleep, it's because they're worried about the mortgage payment. They're worried about paying the rent. They're worried they haven't got enough money to pay for groceries. I think that's a relevant concern for far too many people. People who thought they would never have to face that kind of uncertainty. People who thought they'd never have to wrestle with that kind of desperation at night. But because of these idiots in Ottawa, these liberals, we are facing that. We're facing economic catastrophe. This is like watching the dying days of the Ceausescu regime in Romania. This is how out of touch and detached these Trudeau liberals are. And this is why Trudeau says he likes China so much, because he can just, in China, they just turn the volume up. Like we had here earlier. Just turn the volume up. This is what Justin Trudeau wants to do and continue to govern as a dictator. This is no longer hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. He is governing like a dictator. And there's worse coming in terms of internet censorship. We've got to get rid of him.
That this money is coming. The Honourable Minister of Housing. Mr. Speaker, as the member knows full well, I've been in discussion with my Quebec counterpart with a view to reaching a deal to flow federal funds for housing construction. We understand the priority of Quebec City.
Trusted with the responsibility of investing hundreds of millions of dollars. We do it sincerely, working alongside our provincial partners and ensure that Canadians receive the results of that funding.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, do you know why Quebec's the only province matching Ottawa's $900 million investment in housing? Because Quebec is the only province in Canada that invests in housing. Quebecers have made the progressive choice to invest in housing themselves. And instead of being held up as an example, the federal government is holding back $900 million in a classic flag-waving dispute for which they alone have the solution. It's enough. It's enough. Frappru is in Ottawa today. This would be a great opportunity to announce that the squabbling is over and a deal has been reached. When will the government stop jerking us around and give us the $900 million?
Yep. Give us our $900 million.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only thing we agree on between me and my colleague and Quebec is that
arguing with each other.
Urgency.
Over the size of the sandbox.
We agreed in 2015 on a number of things, and we vote together for Quebec. What's bothering the Bloc right now is that they're not at the bargaining table, and they never will be. On the other side, there are Conservatives who want to take money away from the municipalities and don't trust the provinces. Mr. Speaker, we're going to work together with Quebec and come to a deal on housing.
The Honourable Member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, it is clear that he is not worth the cost. He promised Canadians an affordable Thanksgiving, but all they are seeing are longer lines at the food bank. This NDP Liberal government is throwing off more crumbs than a stale loaf of bread. This half-baked loaf of higher deficits and carbon taxes is making it harder for Canadians to afford Thanksgiving. Will the Prime Minister deliver lower gas and lower grocery prices, or admit he made a turkey of a promise, one that's empty on the inside?
Lots of stuffing. That's all this government's about. It's stuffing.
Mr. Speaker, we could pass our line back 8 years ago when 2.4 million more Canadians were in poverty. And we can ask what the government of Stephen Harper and the official opposition leader did at that point in time. They didn't do anything. And right now, as the global challenge, and
you
yes,
believe
Canada
that?
has one of
you
the
believe
lowest
it
rates
for a
of
minute?
food inflation in the world, but it's hitting us hard. And their solution, stop taking action on climate change, which is the very thing that is driving that problem, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, really?
The reality is they would cancel
climate
the
change is
rebate
now
payments you get. And yes,
driving poverty, is it?
As an example,
How
3.5 million seniors
is this man?
who are
Mark
going to get dental care.
Call him pretty airheaded.
Take that away.
Pretty
That's what they're
imbecilic, pretty moronic.
Député de Elgin, London.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping we can get the minister back to the conversation.
Got his bow tie
Thanksgiving
on.
is normally a joyous celebration for families.
Today.
However,
I guess
this
the blood
year,
isn't getting up to
7
the head.
million Canadians are struggling to put food on their table. After 8 years of after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government and across Canada, food bank visits are skyrocketing, with our highest level in Canadian history, according to the CEO of the Canadian Food Banks. This Prime Minister is worth not the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower prices, or will he break his promise to all Canadians?
Yeah.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And our government is focused on
Well,
lowering
not
grocery
this
prices,
one
and
again.
we have legislation on the table that will do that. But what are the Conservatives
Oh,
focused on?
it will do
Well,
that.
in Alberta,
It will magically
they're
lower
trying to
prices.
pull out of the Canada Pension Plan, Mr. Speaker. Canadians who have contributed their whole lives to the CPP, seniors who have contributed their whole lives to their pensions or having the rug pulled out from under
Comment
them.
coming on this
Mr.
one.
Speaker, will the Conservative leader stand up in this House and tell his colleagues to keep their hands off of Canadians' pensions?
The Liberals have never kept their hands off Canadian pensions. What a joke.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lobinière.
All right.
Mr.
Here
Speaker, after 8 years
here comes
of
the
this,
comment. Yeah. The Liberals have put the pension fund into general revenue years ago. They're spending it all. Don't give me this nonsense. It's somehow been sacrosanct with you thieves. What you have done to the Canadian pension plan would be illegal in the private sector. People would be in jail. But this federal government has been using it as general revenue for years. They know it. Everybody knows it. And they're lying about it.
twice. Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, there is no federal carbon tax in Quebec because Quebec is a leader in combating climate change. Canadians are concerned about the cost of living and by impact of natural disasters on our health and our economy. That's why we created a system that puts a price on pollution to meet their concerns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Rosemont, la petite patrie.
The honourable member for Rosemont.
A price on pollution. So your carbon dioxide is
We're
pollution.
facing an
Right.
unprecedented housing crisis caused by the Liberals and
Understand that.
Conservatives. In fact, we're seeing tents pop up more quickly than affordable housing. People are living in mold-filled apartments, but they can't move because they have nowhere to go. People are suffering, but we know that there are solutions. Will the Liberals buy land and build housing on it that actually meets people's needs? Will they use public lands for public housing? Will they build social
All right,
housing,
this guy,
housing co-ops, and community
you can
housing?
shut up for a minute. I gotta respond to one of our viewers here. Yes, Jacqueline. A very good point. We Albertans want out of the CPP. We are over contributing and carrying much of Canada. Yes, you are. That's called equalization. Alberta's always been carrying the water for the rest of Canada because that's equalization. That's how it works. And it doesn't work well for Alberta or any province that actually has some gumption to want to get ahead. And that's exactly why Alberta wants a CPP. But how come it's bad for Alberta, but it's not bad for Quebec? I haven't heard a single Liberal Canadian. How come Quebec's had a QPP for 50 years? What is going on here? Why is there a double standard? Well, because we live in the country of double standards. Everything in this country is a double standard.
Nope. Mr. Speaker, we can learn from the lessons of the past and heal if this Liberal government is intent on keeping those secrets safe. So, will the Liberal government release the Deschamps report so Canadians can finally know who these Nazi war criminals were that were welcomed into Canada?
I'm interested to see how they... You think Trudeau wants to know? Well, I got a comment about this in a second.
L'honorable ministre de la Justice.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. What happened over the past 10 days in the House of Commons was completely unacceptable and embarrassing for all of us. The former Speaker of the House accepted full responsibility and resigned, which was the honorable thing to do. The Prime Minister apologized in this House. Our country has a dark history with respect to Nazis in this country, which is particularly hurtful to all Holocaust survivors, particularly the Jewish community in this country. Senior officials and civil servants are looking carefully at the Deschamps Commission report and will be making recommendations soon on the options that are available. Merci.
What a great answer, eh? Comment here. Okay, we can ignore this. All right. Does Trudeau really want to find out and reveal to Canadians all the Nazis we admitted in the late 40s and early 50s? All of these former Waffen SS members, all of these Ukrainian Canadians, one of which was invited, and don't tell me it was just the speaker. Trudeau and Zelensky greeted him before he spoke, before he was recognized in Parliament, before he was praised by the Speaker as being a Canadian hero, before every member of Parliament rose from their seats and applauded him, Trudeau and Zelensky were aware he was coming, and don't tell me they didn't know who he was. Of course they did. Now, does Trudeau want to find out? Does he want to tell Canadians how many Nazis are still living here? How many we admitted? That depends. Because I'll tell you, when they start answering those questions, Chrystia Freeland, whose family has a long association with Nazis, her maternal grandfather was a Nazi propagandist. She is going to be really embarrassed by this examination, by this assessment. Now, if Trudeau wants to get rid of Freeland, he wants to throw her under the bus because she's a potential rival, he will go full steam ahead with this investigation and say, find out. If he needs Freeland, if he wants Freeland to stick around, he's going to find a reason why this is going to be too divisive, too contentious for Canadians right now. It's going to cause too many bad feelings and bad memories. So watch if I'm right about this. If this investigation goes through, Freeland gets thrown under the bus, along with a lot of other female cabinet ministers and MPs Trudeau wanted to get rid of. Sorry for reacting too much today.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, there are a number of measures that we have put on the table that will stabilize grocery prices, that will build more homes in this country. And consistently, what we've seen from the Conservatives are delay tactics. Thankfully, this morning, we had a Conservative member stand up in this House and say that he was supportive of the government's legislation and that he would be voting for it. And so I wonder, are there other Conservatives on their bench that are also of that view? And perhaps they could get together and speak to the Conservative leader, because I believe it's actually the Conservative leader that wants to delay help to Canadians.
No, he probably wants to delay the scarcity in the stores and the famine that's going to be.
Yes or no to my question, so I'll try again. Food Bank Canada stated that at this time of year, the number of people turning to food banks is growing. And what happens is that people are forced to make impossible choices. Choices like paying rent or buying food. NDP Liberal food inflation is driving food bank usage to its highest levels since Pierre Trudeau 42 years ago. Yeah. After 8 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower food prices by Thanksgiving, or will he break his promise to Canadians again?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I find it curious that my honourable colleague is standing up only now to defend the interests of low-income families who might need the services that food banks provide, when his party, over the course of my time in this chamber, has consistently voted against the measures that would make life more affordable for them. I look back to when we first formed government, when we raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% and cut them for the middle class, and they voted against it. When we changed the Canada Child Benefit and stopped sending checks to millionaires so we could put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, he voted against it. Every step of the way, including voting to support, opposing support for food banks during the pandemic, they couldn't get behind it. Will he now vote for the measures that can have a direct impact on the price of groceries and support C-53?
This is all illusionary.
The Honourable Member from Coast of Bays, Central, Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, food bank usage in Newfoundland and Labrador is at a 42-year high. Well, make no wonder, according to the PBO, carbon tax 1 and 2 is going to cost households in my province an extra $2,166 per year. After yesterday's vote, where 23 Atlantic Liberal MPs voted to support this suffering, folks back home say this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So will this NDP Liberal government finally be the servant and not the master and axe the tax?
Yeah, Liberals have the audacity to say they care about consumers.
Has endured more extreme weather events, particularly in the province of that member. That's increasing severe and frequent
And it's all
storms,
climate change.
soil erosion, sporadic and unpredicted rainfall, higher than ever temperatures, including here in Ottawa in the last 3 days. Mr. Speaker, that all results from climate change. But as farmers always do, they've persevered and they've developed and implemented more environmentally friendly on-farm practices, and they've reduced their emissions. Our
What a
government
dope.
is supporting them every step of the
Just
way through that
parrots
process, and
the
we'll make
talking
sure that we
points.
continue to
No
be there for
evidence
farmers
at
and
all
consumers when it
that
comes to lowering food prices.
Everything in the environment is somehow related to climate change. Man's an idiot. Anyway.
A better job than that with answering a question. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want answers. According to CTV's news report, many will not be able to afford a turkey dinner this Thanksgiving. With vegetables and turkey up around 70% in just 8 years, the NDP Liberal carbon tax is now taking food off tables. So will the Costly Coalition listen to the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador and axe the tax?
Here, here, here.
Thank you, Mr.
Of
Speaker.
course
What
they
that
won't.
member from Newfoundland won't say is that next week climate action incentive payments will be arriving in the banks, the bank accounts of his constituents, and he should make sure that they know that's coming.
what a
Mr.
farce.
Speaker, if that member really
You get your
believes in
little
affordability,
stipend.
then he ought to vote for Bill C-56
It's enough for the
and
tri-
the
it's
Atlantic
enough for the
Default
trip to
Court,
the
which
beer
he's
store.
standing against.
That's
So,
all.
Mr. Speaker,
This is
this
all
is
they're
not your
doing.
parents' Conservative Party. Mr. Speaker, the Progressive Conservatives stood up against things like acid rain and created solutions. But this Conservative leader, the member from Carleton, doesn't believe in climate change. He's spun on his heels. They've ditched progressive values, and they don't care about fighting climate change or fighting for lower
I wish that
grocery
were
prices.
true,
Thank you,
actually,
Mr. Speaker.
because there's nothing to fight.
The honourable member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr.
All right,
Speaker,
if it's a blockhead, we can shut it off. Yeah. You know, it's yeah. She's talking about the climate change, yes. And I've got to thank everybody for commenting today. It was a slow start, had technical problems beyond belief today, but thank you for coming on and the numbers you have. And I'm going to do this as much as possible. I really hope you all have a good Thanksgiving. I'm going to try to get on again tomorrow. Friday's the worst day of the week for question period. I have to say that because all the key players go home. They only work 3 days a week anyway, and they're not back till Tuesday usually. But I just can't listen to this guy one more time. But thank you again for watching today. And I missed a couple of days this week. Next week we're back at the Freedom Convoy trial, and I'll be bringing you updates on X, formerly known as Twitter. And I will be writing daily articles for the Post Millennial. And I would encourage you to read my article today about Trudeau's non-decision about whether or not they're going to open up the Shane Commission again and reveal how many Nazis came to Canada and if they're still living here. And I would probably think most of them are gone now. But the point is, this was originally it was a Liberal plan. And the Liberal plan to keep it covered up over all these years has sustained itself until this very day. And Trudeau, if you watched him respond to this scandal of him inviting, using the speaker to do so, inviting a former member of the Waffen-SS to sit in the parliamentary gallery, to be praised by the speaker as a heroic Canadian, and then to receive a standing ovation by every MP present. This is not just a bad mistake. It is colossally stupid and immoral. And this should define Trudeau's term as Prime Minister. And let me tell you, for Trudeau to say we were fighting for LGBTQ rights in the Second World War, he must have sawdust in his brain. Because nobody was fighting for that in the Second World War. You might have found somebody, but it certainly probably wasn't more than a dozen people. And that is how stupid this man is. And to suggest that we don't dare keep criticizing his decision to do this, or else we become prey to Russian propaganda, is the worst kind of projection and distraction coming from this narcissistic, hypocritical idiot of a prime minister. He does not deserve our respect. He has earned our contempt, and he continues to do so every day.
I'd like to thank the member for his question. And we need to remind Canadians of the facts, Canadians who are watching today.
Champagne
As
is
soon
just
as
a
allegations were
third
made,
rate,
we asked for an arm's
third
length
rate leader.
expert report, and on the basis
Champagne
of
is
that report,
so
we took
inept.
action. And we required that a plan be immediately implemented, Mr. Speaker,
This
to
is
ensure
the
that we have
parade
the
of the
highest level of
buffoons every
governments
day.
in that
It
fund.
really is. That's a good way to describe question period.
We expect the highest level of governments from all institutions managing public funds. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, it's very interesting to hear what the minister said, but the problem is that it's always the same thing with this government. Every time they're caught with their hand in the cookie jar, then they suddenly do something, but actually the alarm bells had been ringing for a long time, but the government didn't do anything. Now the government is saying we need accountability and serious management. Does this government believe in the current management of this fund who are responsible for the...
Yeah. I just want to share with you, I used to watch Question Period as a parliamentary staffer and as a journalist, and sometimes even when I was in the military, would go there. And I don't know how many I've sat through, hundreds over the years. And you know what? It hasn't changed a bit. You never get answers in Question Period. You get talking points. Conservatives were just as bad at times. I'm not going to carry water for the Conservatives. The policies were better, but Question Period has always been a farce. But it's entertaining, isn't it? Otherwise, you wouldn't all be watching right now. But it's mind-boggling. It's like watching a train wreck. And I want to hear this one, which is good.
This is the case. My colleagues and I brought forward a very common sense motion today in committee asking that the minister come and answer questions with regards to her new podcast registry. This podcast registry, of course, is moving forward under the government's current censorship legislation. The response was this. The NDP, the Liberals, and their Bloc allies all voted down our motion. They don't want to hear. They don't want to ask questions. They don't want to understand. They don't want to give Canadians a voice. In fact, one might refer to them as the censorship coalition. Why is this government so hell-bent on censoring?
Good question, Rachel. Good question. This is the most important question facing Canada today.
Experts have to say about what the CRTC published.
Well, let's not experts. Where did you find your expert?
Today calls a conservative argument a complete disconnect
Pascal?
from reality. He says it's clear it was not intended to control what users see or post online. He calls the CRTC process a mere formality. He said, as a teacher, if a student wrote this in an exam, I put a big 0 on his exam. You really don't have to be able to read to
I
say
put a big
something as
0
pathetic
on
as
your
that.
performance so
Thank
far.
you, Mr. Speaker.
What a stupid answer. Yeah, look at that fat guy guffawing about it.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Léonard Saint-Michel.
Folks, that might have been the best. No, we're not going to listen to this softball question being lobbed at some minister. But Rachel Thomas asked perhaps the best question of the day, because Trudeau's censorship legislation, I call it the internet censorship trilogy. We're coming to part 3. You know, we've already had the Online Streaming Act, the Online News Act. We're coming to something called the Online Safety Act, and it's anything but safe. It's going to ban disinformation from the internet, and they won't even tell you what disinformation means. They have refused to define disinformation, so it can mean anything the government wants it to mean. That is a frightening concept, and it's coming in the fall. Maybe as late as the spring, but it's coming in the fall, and we've got to stop it in the next 2 years, because that's how long Justin can conceivably be around before he whimpers out of here. But it is the most dangerous thing facing Canadians. If we lose our free speech, we lose our ability to attack these damn dictatorial liberals, or whomever decides to be a dictator in Canada, we are losing our essential basic freedom in Canada. And that's exactly what liberals want us to lose, our freedom of speech. They want us to lack the ability to attack them, to criticize them, to put them right.
paying the price. We've learned that the RCMP is investigating allegations of misconduct involving 3 companies that worked on the ArriveCan app. They paint a picture of cozy relationships between this government and questionable contractors. Sweetheart deals for the Liberal insiders while Canadians struggle to make ends meet. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost. When will the Liberal
The
government
Prime Minister's not
come
worth the
clean
cost.
on their unethical
Good
behavior
line.
and quit lining the pockets of Liberal insiders?
L'honorable ministre de la Justice.
Mr. Speaker, this is also my first day rising in the chamber with you in the chair, and I want to congratulate you sincerely on your appointment. Mr. Speaker, misconduct of any kind in procurement processes is never acceptable. We're aware of the RCMP's ongoing investigation into these serious allegations.
He's aware of it.
To protect the integrity of the investigation, we will not be providing any further comment at this time.
Yep.
L'honorable député de Mission-Matsqui, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost. Statistics Canada reports the number of businesses closing shop in Canada is greater than the number of businesses opening. In August, there was a 37% increase in business insolvencies year over year. This is the highest it's been in recent history. Canadians are losing confidence at an alarming rate in their ability to do business in our country. So my question is this: why has the government turned a blind eye to the looming crisis of declining entrepreneurship in our country?
Yeah.
L'honorable ministre.
Because I don't believe in entrepreneurship.
Speaker, I want the small business
That's
owners
why.
of Mission-Matsqui, Fraser Canyon to know that their Conservative member of Parliament has voted against cutting taxes for growing small businesses, voted against lowering credit card transaction fees by up to a quarter, voted against supports for diverse and underrepresented entrepreneurs. Common sense does not mean voting against supports for small businesses, Mr. Speaker.
I wonder what exactly she's referring to there. Anyway, thank you for your comments today, by the way.
Excusez-moi, l'honorable député.
Many of the problems facing small businesses in our country are a direct result of that party's governance and their negligence. Higher inflation, higher payroll taxes, higher carbon taxes, higher commercial rents, a labor crisis, more red tape, entrepreneurs across our country. All of these factors hurt our job creators and business confidence in our country.
All right, we're going to hear the same talking point read back to him. You never get, especially those of you who have commented about Ukraine. I mean, I just saw one comment about 500,000 Ukrainians dead and 15 billion and counting supporting this war just from Canada alone. This does not include NATO countries, including the United States. It's astronomical sums. And I want to challenge everybody who's listening right now. We need to tell the Conservative needs to have a different policy on Ukraine than that of the Liberal Party and the Trudeau government. It is supporting everything Trudeau does to keep the war going. It's supporting every cent that Justin Trudeau gives to Volodymyr Zelensky. It is supporting a war that is killing Ukraine, and they cannot win. It is supporting a policy that Ukraine should become a member of NATO when that is not an option, and it is not going to happen. Who is benefiting from this continual war? Well, the same people who benefit from every endless war without a clear objective. The armaments industry, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, Northrop Frye, all of these companies that have branch plants in Canada that are making the arms that we're selling. They're selling to governments so they can continue to use them against human beings, to kill them in mass numbers and keep this war going. That's what happened over 100 years ago on the Western Front. 4 years of stalemate. where people murdered each other in trenches. That's what's happening in Ukraine right now. This war will continue as long as people like Trudeau says, for as long as it takes. But you know what? Pierre Poilievre is echoing and parroting that talking point. He says the same thing. And we have got to have an alternate policy from the Conservative opposition. If it's to be an opposition, not just on domestic policy, but on foreign policy. We've got to end the war in Ukraine. We've got to have a peace solution before we have a nuclear catastrophe. We are headed towards nuclear Armageddon. It can happen. It's incrementally been going step by step by step since this war began. NATO has had much to do with that incremental increase in the threat of nuclear war. Canada, as a member of NATO, has got to say no, because other members of NATO are also getting very clear second doubts about this war. And it must stop. And we must have an alternate policy from the Conservative Party. I had to get that out today because I know a lot of people are concerned about this.
Over the last 8 years, it's certainly what we're going to do going forward. We made an investment of $200 billion in our health system, and we're making sure that not only does that money flow, but that they're indicating in every corner of this country.
One of the
we're going to make sure
biggest,
that this
loudest mouthpieces of liberal crap that has ever sat in a House of Commons chair. He was that way throughout his entire career when he was a nobody, and he's still that way.
L'honorable député de Fort York.
Mr.
Well,
Speaker,
question
on
period
the
is going on
112th
forever
National Day of the Republic of China, Taiwan, I reflected on a few facts. Taiwan's never held 2 of our citizens as hostages for 1,000.
You have to wonder if they ever
It hasn't intimidated Chinese Canadians
look
or
at the
interfered
clock.
in our elections or tried to buy off MPs or political parties. Mr. Speaker, Taiwan is a democracy. They don't have a president for life who won't hesitate to destabilize
he's
world
right
peace
about this.
or threaten Canada's bilateral trade as a coward liberal government looks on. Can the government enlighten this House if there's been any new credible evidence for it to stand up for Canadians and combat foreign interference by the Chinese Communist Party, or is its new strategy to engage in a diversionary war with India?
L'honorable ministre.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I would like to, of course, reassure all members
Yeah, it's
of
Trudeau's
this House
girlfriend.
of the importance for us to counter any form of foreign interference. That is why the Minister of Public Safety and myself have been working on this over the past months. And of course, we all know that Justice Hug has been appointed to be in charge of the inquiry. That being said, I must also say that we'll continue to work with within our Indo-Pacific strategy, and
That's
we have
really
a China
articulate.
framework part of it. Thank you.
Doesn't she have? She's a master of the English language.
Cela nous amène à la fin de la période des questions orales. Cependant,
Well, I think that's it, folks. Anyway, thank you for watching. And we'll be back again, I hope, tomorrow. But otherwise, I'll be back as soon as possible. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. I hope you can afford to buy a turkey. If you can't, thank you, the Liberals, for that. But I take your comments seriously, and we're getting about 100 times more comments this time around than we did when I started doing this in the summer, late spring, early summer. And I'm going to keep doing it because I think it's important. As bad as question period is, as nauseating as it is, as frustrating as it is, as unbelievable as it is, it really is the essence of what Canada has become. A nation of talking points by the government that are blasted out, that are completely meaningless, that, as George Orwell said in Politics in the English Language, are just streams of words tacked together that have become without any meaning, that lack any meaning, that are meaningless. Brilliant essay. If you ever have a chance to read it, it's only about 25 pages long. It's in all of his collected works, but it's brilliant. Politics in the English Language. Just like 1984, it's never been more relevant than today, because we are constantly dealing with politicians who don't make any sense and who don't care that they don't make any sense. They just speak in talking points and phrases tacked together. And ultimately, they're not doing any of us any good. And we've got to challenge them. That's what the show is all about. This is what I'm standing on guard for as a Canada that I still remember vaguely as standing for freedom. You know. So as I used to say in the Carol Burnett Show, I'm so glad we have this time together. Thanks for watching. We'll do it again soon. And God bless you all.